Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Call Center Confidence Live with Cutter and Catt. I believe in the process we've lost Cutter. Jason, I have no idea where you are. If you're live, you were there 2 seconds ago, and now you seem to have disappeared. So I'm here on my own. Hopefully, he's going to join back in just a few minutes time. So look, lots to catch up on today, lots to talk about and lots to discuss. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about is how we effectively finish off our training cycle and what we need to do in order to pick up when we have those bad apples within training, what we're doing with them, how we're progressing them in the process, and what we're doing to ensure that these trainers or training delegates, as I should say, go through their life cycle from beginning to end. So hopefully Jason's going to be joining us in just a couple of minutes time. In the meantime, I'm going to be looking at the comments that come through, going to be looking at everything that goes live. I can see Eddie has joined us. So Eddie, thanks very much. Hopefully you're here and you've joined us online. So thank you very much for coming on board today. And like I said, we're going to be talking about all of these different things, talking around what we do when we set them up wrong, when training doesn't happen. And that's one of the big ones that I really want to talk about today. When training doesn't happen, things go wrong and things break. And most importantly, when things break, I'm talking about your agents that don't get the training they need. And there he is. Jason is back in the zone. What happened? I felt like you just up and left me mid-intro.
You gotta love live TV where 30 seconds before we start, my main camera decides to die. So had to plug in the backup camera. But good job.
I wasn't sure we were live, so I was just talking. Whether I was broadcasting or not, I was probably just talking to myself for 30 seconds. But anyway, look, welcome back.
Live.
Welcome back. A week off. Your camera doesn't work, and here you are.
I know, and I was already excited. I'm glad to be back. Great job last week with your special guest and covering things. I missed being here, and glad to be back. Glad to carry on what we've been talking about with the training.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was just explaining to everybody that we're going to be talking about when things go wrong, when training doesn't happen, the poison apples that come out of your training class and how to kind of manage that and deal with that. We're going to be talking about testing and proof of learning throughout the induction process and LMS if we get to that point, the learning management systems piece as we get through it. So there's a lot to talk about today. Lot to pick up, and I know, Jason, a lot of these kind of key areas are one and only for your specialty as much as they are as mine, and we're going to talk about how we can use them, how we can benefit from them, and how we can fix a lot of the issues that might arise from that situation, correct?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so look, I'll tell you what, we spoke about training 2 weeks ago. We've got all the way through up to kind of the comp plans piece and introducing that, but I know that one of the topics that you really wanted to talk about was what happens when we set our trainees up wrong in the induction process, when we've onboarded them. So we're going to kick off right there, and we're going to talk about why it goes wrong. We're going to talk about how we set them up wrong, what trainers can do to set them up wrong, and how we can identify that and fix that moving forward. So Jason, I'll kind of hand over to you, if you will. Let's get you going.
Yeah. So setting them up wrong, I mean, there's so many different things within that. I think one of the biggest things is not understanding, especially in that induction process, what it is that people need to then do the job, right? So what kind of training do they need? Setting them up with the incorrect tools. I see a lot of times where there's a lot of emphasis by trainers and companies to help somebody who's new in ways that aren't the highest and best use, right? They're giving them too much information over here, not enough information over there. So that's one of the things. And also like the tools that are being used in the training. I know they're going to talk about LMS systems and platforms and things like that, but just how it's just not done in the best way possible and providing them. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that the points you raised there are very valid. I think you got to do things right from the off. And I think that when it comes to these types of scenarios, I think it's easy for things to be missed. And I think it's easy for things to be overlooked, because what happens is, when we're talking about, when we set them up wrong, are we setting up the group up wrong? Are we setting up an individually wrong, or an individual wrong, should I say? And it's easy to miss the individual because they get caught up and lost in the crowd. For me, one of my most important things that I would recommend to anybody that is running onboarding training, induction training of any kind, is to make sure that you have trackers in place. Working with many companies over the years, I've gone in there and I've done a very simple tracker, and I've kind of given it to them and said, hey, look, use something like this and have it sent out to your management team daily, weekly. I mean, you don't want to overload with information straight off the bat. I think that's something that we definitely don't want to do, because people will get bored of looking at a report at the end of each day. But at least keep your call center management aware of what's going on whilst you're doing your induction. So one of the things that I've previously implemented in quite a few companies that I know is still being used today, because I still get messages from some of the training managers, can we update this? Can we change the formulas here and things like that? And you don't need to formulate them. I run all of my trackers in Excel. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're going to talk about LMSs, and there are ways to track induction training and things like that with technology, but not everybody has technology. And that's one of the things that we also want to talk about in these kind of episodes is, and it came up last week, was budgets. People don't have budgets to spend on technology as and when. If you've got it, great, use it. If you haven't, Excel. It's a great way of doing it, breaking it down by agent, breaking it down by day, looking at things like attitude, behavior, test results. Can include, if you want to be really specific, dress code. You could break it down to attendance. All of those different things that you can put into a tracker actually add up. And by setting people up wrong, you can let people get away with being late 3 times and not pulling them up. Now, if you put that in a tracker, the call center managers that you send the trackers to will go, well, have you spoken to Jason? He's been late 3 times in the last 4 weeks. If a trainer says, well, I put it on my tracker, but I didn't really address it with them, you are setting somebody up wrong straight off the bat, because when they go live, they think it's easy to turn up late. There are so many ways to break this down. There are so many. I could talk about this for hours. It's one of those things of mine that I'm really passionate about, especially tracking information, analytics, data, management information. All of that kind of stuff is so, so, so important. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's so key. And I love that you said Excel. I mean, there's lots of platforms. A lot of times companies think they got to have the latest and greatest technology, that's going to solve their problems, that's going to, fix everything. No matter what, it needs to be manually entered somewhere, somehow. And I love your list of different things that you would put in Excel. Like just tracking it no matter what is a big step forward that a lot of companies aren't doing. And if you have it in Excel, then those categories you're talking about are essentially compliance with the company culture and the rules for the business, right? So attendance, dress code, things like that, attitude, how they're doing. And so when you track those things, one of the biggest keys that I've found, like what you're saying, which is setting them up wrong versus setting them up for success, is ensuring that this whole system is about objective, like monitoring and measuring, not subjective. Because a lot of times what happens is companies and managers, where everyone's human, right? So they're going to default to human subjective. Like, I like Bob, I don't like Jim. I'm okay if Kim is late because she does a good job, and this other person's late and I don't like them because they're not performing as well. So they're going to get in trouble. And so you really want to do, like you said, set everybody up. And it's interesting because I was having a conversation yesterday with somebody, and one of the biggest things I pointed out was that the general tendency is that salespeople move up into managers, salespeople move up into trainers, salespeople pick sales a lot of times because there's not the same rules and structure. They get to do what they do best because they just want to sell. They want to talk to people. And so there's this battle between what the business can put in place with the metrics and the accountability versus what the salesperson is going to want, which is, the ability to just do whatever they want. And so that creates that dynamic where, again, like you said, if you set them up wrong, which is, hey, anything goes. And then later on, you're like, whoa, no, not everything goes. Like, we actually need you to show up for work every day. Then you got a problem.
Hey, look, one thing there that you said right off the bat, and this is a topic that I know is on our list to talk about in the future when it comes to like bad apples, and especially when they're already live and things like that, is you set them up that way from day one. Their expectations are marked. And that's one of the things that many people I know that will be screaming out right now, that will be thinking, oh, I have these types of people in my office, is if you let a salesperson get away with something because you think they're better than everybody else, or what happens when your top performer has a different attitude and thinks they can talk to managers in a certain way because, hey, I'm your top performer, I can do what I want. Lots of great information there and lots of talking points. And if you guys, I'm going to ask you out there question wise, if you've had a top performer that feels that they can get away with anything, I had to choose the right word there. Let us know about it, because I know that happens far, far too often. And what are you going to accept? Performance versus values, characteristics versus deliverables. A lot of choice. But look, we're not talking about that today. We're talking about the tracking. We're talking about the measurements and setting people up from the day one. And I think, look, simple answer, simple point here, track everything. If you are tracking too much, it's the same as your KPIs. Make sure you're measuring the right things for your company. If you do have a dress code policy and you feel that that's a trackable metric, put it in there. If you have a smart cash policy and it's not really anything of concern, then don't put it in. It's as simple as that. But also track test results, proof of learning, which we're going to come on to in a bit, LMS courses, completion rates, things like that. Because when you are sending it out to your managers at the end of each day or week or whatever it be, they can then look back and they have an informed decision of what type of person they're looking at. And also from a training perspective, so senior managers and trainers or training managers, this is a comment for you, this is a great metric for your trainers, because effectively you can start to look at your speed to competency. Are you training at the right speed, at the right variables for the people to understand? And you can look at your metrics and say, well, do you know what? 85% passed, 15% didn't. Why didn't the 15% pass this test? Are we not adhering to learning styles? Are we not adhering to training styles and things like that? So there are so many different things that you can talk about, as long as you're monitoring the right stuff and you're actually using this information to do something with it. Please don't just tick a box and mark stuff for the sake of marking. Oh, I sent my report, job done, don't worry, not my job anymore, I'm passing this up the chain. We see that far too often, don't we, Jason?
Yeah, there's definitely that trend. Again, coming at it from who's generally in sales, what type of people go into sales. If they have to do reports, they'll do it and they'll send it off. And then who's actually doing the analyzing of those reports, of the metrics, and then making decisions. And I love your point about, if 85% pass and 15% don't, it's interesting because you got to look at that. Are we taking account the learning styles? Is it the right speed? Is it the right information? Did we give everyone the right content and context? And then also, and this is where it gets a little messy sometimes, is, okay, well, if 15% didn't pass, maybe that's a sign that 15% isn't getting it and we don't want them, right? Like going back to kind of the go, no go testing that we've talked about a few weeks ago. And that's always a tough one to try to decide. What have you seen in that, where is it us or is it them mode in the training?
Look, I'm going to be honest with you, and some trainers will probably hate me for saying this. Some trainers brush it off as if to say, don't worry about it. They're obviously not picking it up, but they've not reflected and held their hands up to say, well, maybe I am missing something. Maybe I'm not spending enough time with person X, Y, and Z. But then I've also seen trainers hold their hands up and go, right, guys, for you, I'm going to be running some extra classes after hours. And they put the onus on the trainee. And one trainer that I work with that does it very, very well in the past, I worked with her for a number of years, would identify that very quickly, would spend as much time after hours helping, assisting, delivering, off her own back. And I get, we always say, we need to work whatever our business need is, but she would do it off her own back. She wouldn't wait for somebody to turn around and go, hey, look, this person is suffering. You need to spend more time with them. She'd do it herself. She'd get them to where they want to be. And you'd see their performance increase because they're getting that one-on-one or one-on-three tuition or whatever it might be. But this person never got the recognition for all the time they were putting in, all the extra hours, all the extra deliverables. And some of these people that she spent time with went on to become some of the best employees in that company. And I think it's good when you can recognize it yourself. I think it makes a difference if you can sit there and realize, are you doing something wrong or can I do something better? And that goes for anybody in any role, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when that trainer example that you have, it's the same thing that I used with salespeople when, let's say, in the event that the sale is unsuccessful, right? In the event that the trainee doesn't successfully move forward, can the salesperson say at the end of the day, they did everything they could, right? They tried everything they could, they provided everything they could, and it still didn't work. As a salesperson, when you know that you did everything possible and it still didn't close, like the deal still didn't happen, as a manager, as a leader, I'm okay with that. I mean, if you tried everything you could, then that's okay, because you're never going to close them all, right? In the same way that you're never going to train 100% of the people to pass and then be great on the phone or in the role, there's always just going to be that factor. So as long as you can say that, I mean, I think that's really the key. And then the other thing too, for like setting them up wrong, I think one of the big things, and throw this out there just as a reminder, I know we've talked this before with onboarding. One of the biggest things I see is that trainers and training systems, they'll throw some people in on the first day in training and the technology is not set up. The access isn't set up. And it really starts that off. And I know we talked about that in the onboarding and getting people up to speed and making sure everyone has their logins. But I see that so much where the first, sometimes hours of the first day in training is spent like putting out fires and trying to get everyone up to speed. And it costs time. And then B, it just sets the wrong tone and launches things in the wrong way, both for the trainees and the trainers.
I think that's a very relevant point. I think it's a great thing to remind everybody. Everybody, I mean, what do they call them? Most companies call them user access forms. They have to fill them out, sign them up, set them up before anybody kind of comes on board so that IT can go away and do their work. And it's not IT's fault because they've got a million other things to do. But somebody needs to check and test these. And whether it's your trainer, whether it's your manager, whoever it might be, make sure the person who should be checking it is checking it and not wasting that time, especially if you've got a group of, and I cringe at this number, but if you've got an induction group of 20 plus, I know it happens and I know some companies do it, but if you've got that 20 plus number going through an induction, that's a long time to check everybody's IDs, or people get locked out because they've entered their password wrong 3 times. And then you've got to use temporary access. You have to phone somebody to reset a password. Guys, plan ahead. Temporary passwords ready to go, up and running, just in case you need them. Temporary accounts, spare accounts. And make sure people click on you when you say click. That's it. That's one of my pet peeves, when people start clicking ahead in training.
Yeah, that's some good stuff. Now, the next part that we want to talk about was no training, right? So we're talking about setting up wrong. We're talking about training. What in that category? What do you think when you hear either no training, or what have you seen when there's no training?
So I look at this in 2 ways. I talk about no training when training goes wrong and they don't really get anything and it's kind of on the job training, or when people start in a role and they get nothing. And And you can look at it in many ways. So let's start with the subject where people start in their role and they're not given training and support when training doesn't happen. And we're going to look at it from different levels, from my opinion. And you know, if you want to look at it from another way, please let us know. And Jason, likewise. I think from my side of things, as I think everybody knows, and I think I've spoke about it in many posts, in many videos, managers come in, they step in, they get promoted, no training happens. They come in as a brand new role, training doesn't happen. There was a company I worked for when I went overseas, and there was no kind of senior management onboarding. And I think everybody forgets that at every level, no matter whether you're somebody on the phone, a supervisor, a manager, an operations manager, an assistant manager, a manager, director, all the way up to your C-suite, where's your training program? You know, where are you bringing somebody in and putting them through your product training? Do managers need to know the product? And I know that's a very controversial comment, and I know people are going to hate me for this, but in my opinion, if you're working for a company that has product, every single person at every level needs to know your product. If you don't know your product, how can you survive? And that was a company that taught me that many years ago, and a company that I worked for back in the early teens of 2000, was it probably like 2013 to 2015, something like that. I had that reiterated to me time and time again by my CSO. Was he a CSO? Yeah, he was a CSO. And I was heading up training. I was the head of learning and development, and he said to me, "Look, you need to know the product inside and out, and if you don't, then you're in the wrong company. We need every manager to know the product, and especially if you're working in L&D. Learning and development needs to know your product." Am I right? Am I wrong? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, and I see that when, obviously, if somebody's promoted from within to trainer to manager to something like that, they're coming from a place of experience internally where they know the product. Hopefully they do. Not always, but hopefully. But when managers are hired, trainers are hired externally and brought in, I think a lot of times the thought process is, well, we need someone who has management or leadership experience. The product doesn't matter because they're going to come in with that other stuff and they're going to manage and lead everybody.
Yeah.
And what is being sold doesn't matter. The widget that's being made doesn't matter because this is a manager leader with a good pedigree that's going to do it. Same thing with trainers. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, because they know how to train. But I agree with you. I mean, I think when it's done successfully, that manager, that trainer, anybody who starts out is put through the standard new hire training course with a bunch of frontline salespeople so they can learn the product. I do see that a lot where people are just like, okay, well, you'll figure it out, and here's some information, and pick it up as you go, which doesn't work.
No, absolutely. Look, I'm going to hold one of the last companies I worked for before going out on my own. And one of the great things that was set up for me back then was the ability, and I don't think some of the senior management appreciated it, because they were like, no, we need Oliver to hit the ground running, not go and sit in training for 3 weeks. Was they put me in classroom training, and there was me, there was a call center manager, there was a head of web or e-chat. I think there was somebody else, and you got 3 senior managers, directors going in to classroom training, and I sat in there with one of the training managers who ended up reporting into me, and she did a very good job. She trained us. I mean, don't get me wrong, we were very experienced. She reduced the training for us because we were managers, but it was specifically set up when we went in to go and do product training. And at the end of those 3 weeks, I made it a point, and I know the other 2 did as well, to jump on the phones, to take web chat conversations, and make sure that the product learning, the system learning, and everything that we'd been taught, we could put into use. And I took calls from day one. As soon as I came out of training, that was something very important to do. And I was going in there as a director of learning and development. And I think that set me up for success when I know I needed to access certain systems or certain technology. And I think, but I know after that, there was, people weren't allowed to do that because it was time restricted.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, I'm not sure if you're still there, Oliver, is that I think it's really tough to lead and manage and hold people accountable to something that you don't know yourself, that you're not very familiar with, that you can't totally explain, sell, go through on your own. I think that's just always such a big thing. There he is. He's back.
Hey.
But yeah, so what I was saying was that, it's tough. I firmly believe that somebody has to be able to sell or explain or do the job that they're expecting other people to do. I mean, I know there's people who think, okay, you could just manage anything. I don't need to know it. I'm just going to do it. Even again, going into, if you're in that role, learning it and then stepping into that role, I think is key. One thing is that you can figure out if your people underneath you are just giving you BS because you know the facts and the truth. The other one is that it helps, validate that you're in that position, you know what you're talking about, and people
Yeah.
respect you and your authority and your leadership because you're like, hey, when I did this, here's what I did, or here's what I know about it, and here's what we need to do.
Yeah, and there's look, I love your comment. There's no sweeping under the rug. There's no pulling the wool over somebody's eyes because they know what's in and what's out. So look, that's it from my part about when training does and doesn't happen from especially the management piece. Look, you've got the ability to train your managers and your leaders, do it. Granted, frontline sales, service, technology, provisioning, whatever it might be, any of your frontline reps on the phones 100% need training. I mean, it's a given. I think the shortest induction I've ever done or delivered or been a part of for a company has been 2 days. The longest has been 6 weeks. From an agent level, I can't say I've ever been at a company when agents don't get training. The one thing that I think is detrimental to some reps on the phone is when they're brought in outside of an induction plan because you need to ramp up in headcount. And what we do find a lot of things happening, and I've worked for a number of companies as in-house and a consultant where I've seen it happen, where people are brought in and they're given side-by-side training. Now, side-by-side training is always a good thing to have. It works. But remember, you're learning from one person who may or may not be doing it right or wrong. And that's a fine line. Yes, their QA scores may be excellent. However, their system knowledge may be below par. There's so many different ways and factors to look at it, but you're not learning from somebody who's experienced enough to tell you everything about everything that you need to know. I mean, what do you feel when you bring somebody new in, Jason, and it's side by side? You know, what's your opinion on that?
I think, honestly, my reaction is it's a dangerous game. Because you're trusting that side by side, the mentor is the right person who's going to teach them in a proper way and not give them any of the drama associated with any company or any role, not give them any gossip, not taint them in any way, and then teach them what works. And here's the challenge with the side by side is that everybody's different. And if we even take out the everybody's different and we say there's 4 main personality types or 16 personality types, and then there's introverts and extroverts, and there's this and that, is how do you pair them up with someone whose selling style matches that new hire, that new trainee, right? Because just because it works for Kim doesn't mean it's going to work for Bob. And if Kim's like, here's what I say and here's what I do, it's like, well, that's great, except that's not my style. And so I think the side-by-side is good. I think you just have to be careful who it is, and then multiple ones, so somebody can see different perspectives, listen to different examples, see, what style could work for them.
Yep.
What do you think?
Yeah, I like the multiple people thing. I think the idea and the premise behind it is, look, you've got to find a way when somebody comes in. As you said, what's the lesser of two evils? Do you wait? Do you not have the head count? Do you let your center suffer because you've not got people in there? There are so many different options. I don't think there's any right or wrong. I think there's only opinions when it comes to something like this. My opinion is, I agree with you, is kind of put put them with multiple people to get multiple exposure. I can't even speak today. I tell you, it's crazy. But I also think that a trainer needs to be involved somewhere along the line, maybe just to make sure everything is sense checked, everything is leveled off, and that people are singing from the same page. That's my thought process on that.
Yeah, and I think the QA part is important too. So I see a lot of times where the default mode is the manager wants to put the new hire with the top performer.
Mm-hmm.
The top performer isn't always the most compliant, and especially if you know what you're doing. There's safety compliance, like they're just saying the wrong things or they're saying bad things. But then there's also somebody so experienced they're skipping steps because they don't have to do them because they already know what happens.
Yeah.
And so it's a delicate balance of who do you put somebody with that's super thorough, does it exactly how you want it to be done, and then is going to show them a proper way. Which then going into that gossip part and the toxic thing that I was talking about was bad apples, which I know is near and dear to your heart.
Yes, 100%. I can agree with you on that one. So how do we deal with poison apples? Because the thing is, they are there. They're within there. Sometimes it happens whether we build them, we grow them, or they are in there anyway, and we just notice them. So what's your opinion with dealing with them?
So are we talking about training bad apples, or are we talking about on the floor bad apples?
Let's start with the training, because obviously we've still got on the floor to go, people. If you're paying attention and you're still live with us after all of these episodes, we're not even there yet.
No. So I think it's really important to nip that kind of stuff in the bud as quickly as possible. People who are poison in the training environment, it's not going to get better. It's like any relationship. If there's red flags and there's drama early on in a relationship, it doesn't usually get better. Usually people are on their best behavior when they're interviewing, when they're in training, when they're starting out, when you're dating somebody for the first time. Like you're bringing your A game and then pushing aside your baggage, your drama, your quirky habits, like, all these other things. And so if you're already noticing things that aren't a good fit with the company, right? Poison apples, meaning somebody who's just not a good fit for the culture. Maybe they're negative, maybe they're toxic in the training environment. It will not get better. Sales will not get easier than training. Sales only gets harder after training, because then it's about, getting rejected and failing more times than you win, right? Any successful salesperson is losing more than they're winning, even if they're a superstar. And so if you notice it, it will not get better. And my biggest thing is to cut those people out. Have a conversation with them, but if necessary, just cut them out and talk to them. Have the it's not a good fit conversation with them, especially to show everybody else that you're not going to tolerate that. I mean, I think that's the big key, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I think that is the key. And I think a lot of people are afraid to have those conversations, but you shouldn't be. You shouldn't have to be in that position to worry about having those conversations earlier on. I mean, I remember, I still to this day remember the first person as a trainer and where I was and who I was with, the first person I culled from my very first training class because she wasn't very good. And it wasn't, look, I hold my hands up and say it wasn't my fault. I don't know. I mean, I was very early on in my training career, but it was a company I was working for in London, and we sat down. It was the very first training class that I ran on my own after being trained on how to run that project. It was for an outsourcer at the time. And I remember being in a little meeting room and she burst into tears. And I'm not a tear person. I'm going to be honest with you. If somebody breaks down in tears in front of me, I'm like, it will be okay. Don't worry. You'll be fine. I mean, I don't do tears. God knows what happens when my daughter starts crying at me. I don't know what I'm going to do at that point. I'll be like, okay, you can have whatever you want. I promise. Don't worry about it. But I remember sat there and it was so difficult. And my advice to anybody going through those conversations, my tips to anybody having to remove somebody from training is remember, this person, if you feel they are genuinely not a bad, if they are not a good fit, if they are a person that's going to bring the rest of the group down, if they're going to mess things up, if they are not going to deliver, remember, and this isn't anything bad, but this person is on your head as a trainer. You need to make sure that you sign this person off, because if they go on the floor and they don't deliver what you've said they can deliver, if they don't do what you've said they can do, then people start to question your thought process about putting these people out on the floor. And I think that's a really important message. And that's not to be horrible. That's not to kind of put any bad thoughts or feeling on anybody whatsoever. But you're training this person. You're there. And again, you may need to go for your managers for support. You may need to get somebody else in there to do it. But don't be afraid to have those difficult conversations if you've got the autonomy to make those decisions. That's my 2 cents on it.
I think there's a couple of things. First off, yes, when your daughter gets older and starts the waterworks, I feel like you're going to become a softie and a pushover. And I'm going to guess, just based on what I know of you, I think that's going to happen. But a couple of things on the training side. I mean, I think one is always keep in mind, this is one thing when having to terminate somebody, cut someone from the team, basically on performance or attitude, is if they're not performing well, they're not happy either. And if their attitude is bad, they're not happy either. And so maybe they're not taking the initiative to quit, but it's usually for the best. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, to your point about trainers, signing off on somebody moving forward. I think companies have to be really careful with that, because I've seen some trainers who do not want, do not want to be blamed for somebody who gets out on the floor, and they overreact trying to cut too many people that they struggled with training, people that they couldn't get through to, get them to understand it. And they just want to cut as many people as possible so that it doesn't look bad on them.
Yeah. No, I can see it that way. I mean, I can't say that I've experienced that. Apologies if there's any audio issues. Another thunderstorm and rain cloud has just opened up on top of my house. I can't say I've seen that overcompensation from my side, but I can certainly appreciate that actually that might be a thing. And now that you've put it in that context, yes, I don't know, maybe I've done it before in the past. I don't know. But again, if you're unsure who you should call or if you should call them, this is why tracking, this is why metrics, this is why it's so important that your call center management team, supervisors, people who have maybe been in that role before. And if you're running a call center, guys, encourage managers to go into that training and see for yourself what these reports are saying, or see for yourself that your trainer is saying, hey, look, Jason's in training, he's not delivering, he's not a good fit for the call center. Go and see it for yourself. And don't be afraid to walk in there and be honest and open with each other, because that way, then that way we're going to see the results that we want to see. But I like your thought process on that, Jason. I see your point. Maybe that the autonomy is removed from inexperienced trainers, and it's a thing for later on. So managers, think about are your trainers competent enough and comfortable enough to do that and make the right choices. And again, I would say that boils down to experience and tenure more than anything else.
The experience and what you said, which is the tracking, right? So the reports, the metrics, the data, to make it objective, not subjective, right? Because what I have seen is trainers who go, well, they don't have it. They don't have what it takes, and they're not going to make it. Okay, but show me the numbers. Show me the results of whatever you're putting them through that shows that they don't have it.
Hey, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
That's it. Exactly.
There's your bottom line. Everything has to have a number. Simple as that. There you go. Job done. Mic drop.
which then goes into the next topic, which is the testing and the LMS, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. So I think maybe let's talk about testing first, because obviously the tech, and when we come on to talk about technology and LMS platforms, I want to be clear. We are not sponsored by anybody. We're not pushing anybody's technology. We are not branding anything. We're going to talk very generically and very openly. I'm sure we've worked with some great platforms and some bad platforms, as I'm sure every single one of you have. But again, we're not here to push technology on you. That's up to you to make your decision. We can make recommendations. But hey, if somebody wants to sponsor us so we can recommend their platform, then great.
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah, get in touch. Testing. Okay. Very much similar to metrics, in my opinion, is make sure your tests are adequate to the content that you're pushing out there and make sure it's relevant to what you are talking about. Nobody wants to have a test based on useless information. I've been asked to rewrite testing for a couple of companies in my time, and it always scares me. It scares me. The first time or the first test in a series of tests is one about the company overview. And when I talk about company overview, I'm talking about, can you name the head of marketing? Can you name the person in charge of the call center? I get that's relevant. I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think it's right, Jason, to have something like that in there and worry people about this kind of stuff?
No, and we talked about that in the onboarding, where you're talking about like the pictures in the slideshow representing everyone in the org chart, or the dog and pony show of bringing people in. Again, I think it's testing people based on what they need to know that's important, either company culture wise, company operation wise, or sales ops wise, right?
Yeah.
Because some of that might be important, right? The mission, the vision, the core values. If that's a strong thing within the company and it's public and it's a part of training, then people should be tested on it, because you're going to hold them accountable to that and the decisions they make. Right?
Yeah.
If timekeeping is super important and you have strict rules around that and dress code, then that should be tested, probably more from HR than from sales training, but that should be tested so that, and really what you're trying to do with a lot of this stuff is, at some point down the road, when somebody says, "Oh, I didn't know I had to wear pants," you're like, "Yes, you do. And I have the test results here that said you did know that you had to wear pants. And this is the test results," right? Because people's memories change. And so the testing is so important. Everything and anything that's important to the job. But again, I agree with you. Sometimes companies go overboard where they think somebody has to know everything. Part of that is, I think, ego. Part of that is, I think, again, a lot of times companies and trainers forget what it's like to be new. They forget how overwhelmingly overwhelming it is to be new, to try to drink from a fire hose, and what stuff will be retained and what stuff will not.
No, I think you're right there. I mean, look, making it fun, making that entry, information still viable about wearing pants. At the end of day one or beginning of day two, run a fun quiz where you throw out sweets and lollipops and cans of Coke and things like that. Obviously, everything I've just mentioned is bad for your teeth, so HR might have a problem with it. But look, make that one fun. Throw prizes out, throw incentives out, because you know what? That's the kind of stuff people want to see on day one. So do your company induction, and then go, right, at 5 to 5 on the first day, go, right, guys, pop quiz. This one, a bit of fun. Who is the person who's running HR? Got a can of Coke for you. Bang, throw it out. Obviously, don't hit them on the head in the process. But that's the fun stuff. Product, sales training, scripting, systems. These are the things that need testing. Now, again, it's breaking it down into many different ways and many different ways of testing. And that's why, in my opinion, testing should be varied based on what it is. And what I mean by that is, if you are doing systems testing, don't do it on a bit of paper and ask questions. Put your systems test into the system and make it video checked, make it e-learning based or something like that. When you are testing people on customer service, sales skills, objection handling, closing techniques, make that test oral or written if it's going to be on e-chat or web chat. Again, don't make it paper-based. The amount of tests in my years that I've had to rewrite and restructure because everything has been on paper or everything has been in an Excel spreadsheet is not giving you proof of concept. When it comes to things like product, when it comes to things like general knowledge, then yes, make them on paper, put them in an Excel spreadsheet, put them in your LMS to do testing, but make it fun and engaging. Multiple choice, connect the dots. I mean, the list could go on, but make sure your testing is relevant to what you're trying to do. If you want to test somebody on eChat, test them in words per minute, how they interact and tonality over text, rather than just everything else. What do you think to that?
I think it's interesting. I never super thought about that in the same context that you put it in. But it matches what I said in the recruiting process, where depending on what you're doing in the job, recruit, test, put them through hoops that are similar to what the job is, right? Short cycle, long sales cycle, highly scripted, not scripted, all of that. Again, if you're saying, hey, if it's a script training, I mean, you could do a written test or something in a platform, but what's going to make the most sense relative to that? How do you do the testing in the platform itself? If it's a CRM test, they've got to enter in the data of a new lead form. Well, don't just give them a paper test and be like, okay, here, what would you click on or what would you enter? It's like, no, have them go through it. And there's some really good and easy platforms to use for that. But I think that's such a good point you made, which is to make sure the testing is relative to what's being tested or what's being observed so that it fits, right?
Sorry, I lost you. I literally cut out there on that last phrase, but from what I gather, you said about making sure the testing fits, right?
Yep.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. So many companies can overlook that. But again, it will be because of history. It will be because of what's been done previously, time to invest into changing everything. And again, I'm sorry, I don't know if you mentioned this when you cut out, so I do apologize, but it's like you don't need to spend a fortune to make sure your tests are fit for purpose. I don't know if you touched on that. I'm sorry if you did.
I didn't, but that's a good point. I think the other thing too, and this is where I see trainers not going the full distance generally, is not testing enough. I will tend to generally, I wouldn't say over test, but I'll test everything. If we do a little module that's 15 minutes, there should be a quiz and a test. After everything that's being taught, there should be some kind of quiz or test to confirm that they got that information, right? You want to make sure that they're absorbing it at some level, and then there's that tracking, and then you have final exams or something bigger. But a lot of times I deal with trainers and organizations from the consulting side, and they resist the amount of testing that could be done or should be done. And like, well, how do you even test that? Well, you've got to figure it out. But we need to make sure, because it helps reinforce it. It's not so much from a punitive standpoint. It's not a pass fail. It's a, okay, what did you understand? What do I need to help you with? Like your example of the woman trainer, who was going above and beyond on her own. And then, where do we need to get better? Where's our training missing the point? If not enough people are passing in this one module, maybe our training sucks, right? Maybe it's not detailed enough.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think, it is a time to review. It is a time to assess. And that's something that I feel a lot of companies can easily, again, overlook in terms of, is everything right? Go back and compare your results to other classes. Look back. Don't be afraid to track data, because as you say, and I know we kind of touched on it briefly about, making sure that why did these 15% pass? Why did these 15% fail? Is go back over, hit my microphone, go back over the last 6 inductions that you've done and see if the percentages match up. And then maybe you are missing the mark on something. Maybe you are not delivering something right. And then also compare it trainer on trainer. Because is trainer X making sure that everybody gets 100%? Is trainer Y only getting this amount of percentage? Is trainer Z doing that? But then again, how are they reiterating the information? Are they doing a mock test beforehand and asking questions that are technically relevant to the training test that's coming up, that's unofficial, that is official, to falsify numbers. There are so many things to mark and manage when it comes to your training department. I recently spoke to a contact of mine who manages quite a number of centers, and the trainers on site report into their site leads, site directors, and things like that. And there's not really much unification between them in terms of one centralized hub. So in terms of statistics, numbers, metrics, measurements, and content, they're doing the same thing as where one trainer passes on their knowledge to the next and to the next and to the next. But what happens when you make a copy of a copy of a copy? Eventually that degrades because the original message is no longer there. So how are we managing training? And all of a sudden I've got a question that I've just asked that has just opened up a can of worms, because there's a lot of things that I could talk about right now.
Yeah, and that's one of those things, right? Is that inconsistency. And I see that with so many organizations where, and I think we talked about this 2 weeks ago, where the good salesperson was promoted, sometimes to a team lead, then into a trainer role, sometimes directly into a trainer role, depending on which path they go. And then here they are, and they're training the way they think everything should be done. They've created their own training, maybe no quizzes, maybe no real materials, created their own slides. I've walked into so many organizations where I'm like, okay, show me what you're training. And I look at their slide deck and their training materials, and I'm like, A, it looks like it was done by a fourth grader. B, like, how is this going to help them? And it's just inconsistent, right? What's done from class to class is just so different. And trainer to trainer is so different. And that's where it's so important to standardize it, is have one thing. Here is what we teach everybody. Imagine, let's say public school. Imagine instead of a textbook, every history teacher just teaches whatever they want about history. Instead of here's the textbook and here's the goal at the end of the semester or the year. Instead they say, you're a history teacher, good luck. Like you should know what people need to learn. So just teach them whatever you think is important.
I love that. That is probably one of the best metaphors that I could have ever asked for, because I think that literally drives the nail in through the hammer, hook, line, sinker. Don't know if I've used any of those analogies correct, but that is exactly what you've just driven home. Is how do you standardize training? And I think that's for another episode, but I think we do need to go across an episode of how do we standardize training. I mean, there's got to be people out there that don't know how to do it, and I think that's a very relevant point.
Yeah, I think that, which will lead into the LMS, which will go back into the testing, which goes into all those things. I think that is a great topic for next time. Probably a good place for us to start. Otherwise, this will be a 2-hour episode.
Yeah, you know me, I could talk forever.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, well, look, it's been a pleasure as always, Jason. Good to have you back. Anyway,
thank you. I'm glad to be back, and I'm putting on the screen here, if anyone's watching live or watching the replay, Oliver's information. Obviously, you can find the Oliver at thecatalyst.com with 2 T's, and everywhere else. I don't know if you're the #1 ranked Oliver Catt or the Catalyst on Google. I don't know, but I'm sure you're probably pretty close. People can find you.
There's a long way to go with SEO content. I mean, website management, I got no clue whatsoever. I think I ended up breaking my website about 10 times the first time I tried to build it anyway. So if anybody's watching and does free website design and would love to redo my website and start ranking it, please get in touch.
We'll get you more content out there as well. And then if anyone wants to get a hold of me, Jason at CutterConsultingGroup.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Both of us on LinkedIn. We are here every Wednesday and rock and roll, and make sure to submit things. Obviously, like we've been saying, working on the website, working on lots of other cool stuff to make this more of a community and more interactive. Appreciate everybody that's been tuning in. Anything else before we go?
No, that's it from me, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. We should probably get on that website design and get our free website designer to do that as well. But yeah, look, it's coming. We are going to backlog. I know we've had a few messages about people asking about previous episodes. They are online. You can find them on LinkedIn, dotted around between Jason's profile and mine whilst we found our feet before we put them on our pages. And also the Call Center Confidence page, which is on LinkedIn. You'll find the last 3 or 4 in there as well. But like I said, they will all be hosted in one location very soon. So look, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. As always, looking forward to seeing you next week, where we will definitely talk about the LMS, because clearly we ran out of time today. And I'm very much looking forward to standardizing training, because I know there's a lot of people out there that will need that help. So that's it from me. Have a great week. Over to you, Jason. Thank you.
That's it. Thanks, Oliver. Thanks, everybody. And we'll catch you next week.